I'm explaining why services were so relevant, because as we understood that the experience economy was what it was about, lifetime value was the goal, it was about outcomes, not products, we realized more and more that, the value was in the services. Now, today, things have changed very dramatically. I'm going to give you a short list of how I think it's changed, how I would write the article differently today. So let me start off with digitalisation, because obviously the way in which we deliver services today is different. We know that. I don't have to dwell on that. How you do that, of course, is very important. But significant here is that you can do it at scale, globally, very quickly, at very low cost. So the economics has changed. Remember in the old days when we talked about value-add services, it was about adding more people. Somebody was making a car, now you're telling them, or a washing machine, now you're telling them repair is as important as the computer. Maintenance is as important as the car itself, because when the car breaks down, if you know, because you're connected digitally to your client, that the car is broken down and you can be there to assist, and you can supply another car, and then you can give them their car back in good time and good shape, and all of this is built into your contract with them. Obviously, that's a whole different experience for the customer. So the first thing that's important is that a lot of the services are digital. Zoom is a service. There's products associated with it. I mean, I'm touching a computer, right? And I've got a piece of software, but ultimately Zoom delivers a service, and we pay for that service. And that has dramatically affected the fact that we didn't have to get on planes to meet each other. It's affected conference centers, it's affected hotels, it's affected airlines, all the things you and I know about. All the asset-rich types of business models are now being displaced by the digital-rich, which is a service models. And that, of course, changes the economics. So it becomes cheaper and cheaper to deliver services. And as you deliver more and more services digitally, with AI, machine learning, you're learning more and more about how to deliver that service, which makes you the expert and sets up barriers to entry to competitors. And it also tells you more and more about that customer, so that you can keep adding more and more value to that customer, which means that you're setting up barriers to competitive entry because you know more about that customer than anyone else. Now, everybody's talking technology, but not everyone is using technology in the right way. I'm saying if you're using technology in order to deliver service, in order to become the expert that makes it difficult for anyone else to catch up, or to know that person and become more indispensable to that person, then you're using technology for the right reason. So that's the first thing. It's a whole story all on its own. It changes the economics and it helps you set up barriers to competitive entry. So that's number one. Number two is a trend which I think is probably the most important trend to see into the future. If you ask me to see into the next 35 years, I won't be here, but it will be anything as a service. I don't think people are going to want to own things anymore. I think that's an old notion. We see it happening already. So you have a company, instead of now this has dramatic ramifications. A company makes a washing machine or a solar system that goes on your roof in your building or your home. In the old days, we bought it, it was transactional. If it was delivered on time and we got good advice, and if we were lucky enough, if it broke down, they came on time or quickly to fix it, we were happy. Okay. In the future, it'll be about the company owning that asset, not transferring that asset. So it's on their balance sheet. We won't own it, and we will pay for, let's say, 100 washing cycles a week. We will move into subscription pricing. So you pay a certain amount a month in order to have solar panels up and running, which means the responsibility for making them work, maintaining them, repairing them, upgrading them is the company's responsibility or part of their ecosystem. So it's not my responsibility if the machine breaks down, if it's a washing machine or a solar system or a fleet of trucks for that matter. It's not my responsibility to keep it going, make it work. You are getting the service. I don't know what Amazon is going through, and I don't care whether there's a strike, whether it's raining, whether the warehouse is burning. As long as I get my book or my whatever on time, I'm not interested in what's going on behind the scenes. And that's what's going to, because Amazon, and I wrote the first case study on Amazon in 1996, by the way, Amazon is, the epitome of service. The fact that they're delivering books, the fact that they're monetizing around books and goods, that's irrelevant. It's the service that they are offering, where I can get something from anywhere in the world within 48 hours, and I'm not exaggerating, beautifully wrapped at my doorstep. Whereas locally, if I want something in a different size, they're going to tell me it takes 7 working days to get from one suburb to another. It's the service. They're finding it, they're searching for it, they're matching your preferences, they're packaging it, they're getting it to you. It's the service that we're paying for. How you monetize that is a different discussion. So if you look at Netflix or Spotify, this is entertainment as a service. If you look at Uber, this is mobility as a service. The assets we don't own. It's not about owning the assets. It's about delivering and getting the service. Cloud is all about anything as a service, computers as a service, software as a service. And that's important because when you can buy this retailing as a service, Shopify, very important. If you're a small business now, you don't have to build your own infrastructure. You go onto the Shopify website and you share the infrastructure that they have actually developed. So it's retail as a service, banking as a service, where you have bankers today offering anybody who wants to go into banking their infrastructure to become a bank. So anything as a service is the future. Subscription buying, where you don't own it, but you, for lack of a better expression, people call it renting or leasing. It's not that, but it doesn't matter. It approximates that. As I said, the asset belongs to the supplier, which has a ramification on their balance sheet and their lending and their cash flow. The old days, the washing machine, you knew it would last a certain amount of time and the customer would have to replace it. And very often it was built into the system, by the way. It was built in, obsolescence was built in. Now the manufacturer needs to have longevity because it's their asset. It pays them to keep it going for as long as possible. Therefore, they use less material. It's more environmentally friendly. So that's a huge part of all of this. The other thing that's important in services today is that waste is becoming an important marketing resource. And I'm not talking about material waste. I'm talking about the intangible waste. So it's people sitting at home, it's spare capacity, it's space in an attic. So you have a company like Neighbor, which happens to be an American company, who will say, don't go to these storage companies that are out of town and old-fashioned and have old-fashioned ideas. You have to do everything yourself. There are people in this neighborhood who have spare cupboard space, spare attics, spare garages. We know who they are, and we know you need space, and we have a two-sided platform that matches that need with what you've got, which is the Uber model. You have a company in the UK called Cohelo who've discovered that machines in hospitals are only used 40% of the time. What they do, which is a service, is they find out where the machines are that are underutilized, and they match that to hospitals who require those machines at any moment in time. It's a service. So it's about the elimination of waste. And of course, the technology enables you to detect that waste, to find that waste and match it to the people that want it. There are two more big ones I want to talk about. Services are, I think, in the future going to be much more, not only are they digitally delivered, which we know, companies will not necessarily have huge service departments. They will use part-timers increasingly, because they're now able to find people who are available with the skills that they need and call them in when they need them and only when they need them. So you have IKEA, for example. Now, IKEA is very interesting. because they were all about, as you know, big stores selling products for the home. Today, they use the technology to enable you and me to use three-dimensional technology in order to visualize what furniture would look like what, or what color would look like what, or what texture would look like what in your various rooms. So you can decorate your rooms yourself. If you go back to my paper, the paper was about self-service. So now they're using their technology as a service to enable you not to have to go to the store, but remotely, using imaging techniques, see what that stuff would look like in your own home. So remember, now you're in the decoration space. It's part of the whole experience that you're going through. They want to keep you over time, so they're building up this data about you so that they can continue to add value when you redo your home, when you move. They know your taste, they know what you bought, they know what you like. So that's the first interesting thing. So it's become more of a service company. The second interesting thing is that whereas before you and I used to assemble the goods ourselves, collect the goods ourselves, now they have bought into a part-time freelance service company called TaskRabbit. And what TaskRabbit is a company that matches people sitting at home who are retirees with skills, freelancers in other words, with tasks that have to be done at somebody's home. So huge amount of service companies rising up, which are based on being able to leverage people on a part-time basis instead of having these huge overheads when they need them, locally, in real time, by the way. Of course, that has a dramatic effect on their costs. They either buy them, as IKEA has done, or they just utilize them. You have Swisscom, for example, a mobile company in Switzerland. They have now changed from a full-time maintenance force to an ad hoc local real-time force. So that's the other big trend. So it's digital accessing people only when you need them. The other big thing that I want to talk about is artificial intelligence, of course, which I mentioned in the article, believe it or not. I couldn't believe it actually 35 years ago. And it's very subtle and very difficult to explain, but I'm going to explain it through an example. There was a startup in this country called Aerobotics. Aerobotics, South African startup, now in 16 countries, by the way, because the important change in services is that the more digitalized they are, the quicker, cheaper you can scale globally. So you start in South Africa and 3 years later you're in 16 countries, because once you've built the software, which is the service, you can take that anywhere with adaptations that cost next to nothing at very low cost. They used to have sensors. They went into the agricultural sector at the beginning, and what they said was, we will sell you sensors and drones so you can see what's going on on your farms. And then they decided, no, this was not the thing. The real thing, which is a market space, which is the outcome-based thing, is crop productivity. So they defined their space as crop productivity. And based on machine learning, they are able to tell a farmer on a minutiae basis, i.e., every square meter of land they have, what trees are healthy, what trees are unhealthy, what trees need help, what help they need, etc., etc. So they changed their business from selling sensors and drones to crop productivity. And crop productivity as a service, as opposed to selling drones and sensors, which are products, is the collective intelligence, obviously, that they get every time they intervene with a tree or with a farm or with a farmer. And once they've built that expertise, and it's ongoing learning through AI, they can take that anywhere, and they have throughout the world. And of course, it's the data that becomes very valuable. So they can start using that data not only to globalize their service, but to go into other sorts of farming, to do other things for farmers, and so scale and so build their revenue base. And they've even gone so far now as to be able to sell what they know, because it's knowledge, and that was also in the original article, knowledge as a service, what they know to retailers to predict, for example, crop availability. so that retailers know what crops and how much of a certain crop is likely to be available at any moment in time. These services are embedded in the AI, which is constantly learning, constantly updating, which was impossible before because people accumulated knowledge, and that was part of the problem being in services. The knowledge was in their heads. How do you get it out of their heads and share it with other people? Today, that's not necessary because the machines accumulate the knowledge and they learn at incredible speeds, an incredible amount, as we all know. And this is what sets up your barrier to entry. This is what makes you the expert, because every time you intervene with a customer, you're learning something new, you're getting better and better at it. And it makes it very difficult for anyone else to catch up. So I think these are, the new trends in services driven by technology, but also a different attitude, which is that people don't necessarily want to own things, that the core business is a means to an end, that we are responsible for, as suppliers, for producing that end, and that you can only produce that end through value-add services. You or your ecosystem can only produce that end through value-add services. I like Amazon because if something goes wrong, I contact Amazon. I don't contact their courier. I like them because I don't have to walk around looking for what I'm looking for. They walk around. That's a service. So anything as a service is the future. It's going to take a long, long time for business to acknowledge that they're not going to make money out of that thing that they produce, whether it's tangible or intangible. I think if I was writing the paper today, it would be a summary of what I've said. The first thing is, I think most people who are thinking acknowledge that they have to be outcome-based. They don't necessarily do it, but they acknowledge. They not acknowledge that the customer experience is important. It's not just the experience you have on Singapore Airlines. It's the fact that, and this happened to me a few weeks ago when I couldn't go to Japan because they closed the borders. It took us 3 weeks to get through to Singapore Airlines. I don't care that Singapore Airlines, have wonderful food or their service on board is terrific. What I remember is the nightmare of trying to get through to them on the phone. Well, you just couldn't. So we're talking customer experience, we're talking customer outcome, and we're talking lifelong value. The moment you believe that, which you have to believe if you're customer centric, then you have to acknowledge that your products and services are a means to some end, and you and your ecosystem are responsible for that end. And if you look at the people that are successful today, you will see that they acknowledge that. That end is not possible without services. Now, whether you make those services or not is not important, provided the quality of the services is high and managed, and provided that they know they're dealing with you. When I take an Uber, I know I'm dealing with Uber, not the guy that's in the car, who may be good or bad. And if he's bad often enough, I'm going to blame Uber. So quality of the services and the ability to manage the ecosystem, very important. And the fact that you're dealing with Uber, the relationship is with Uber. And the fact that it works. The first time I used an Uber and I wasn't an early adopter, I couldn't believe that it worked. I pushed the button and the car was there. It works and it's easy, as opposed to when brands which are difficult to do business with, where you bought the product but you can't get them to come and something goes wrong and it takes weeks to fix and that sort of thing. So people criticize Uber, but Uber's actually got the basics right. I think it's important to recognize that you don't have to necessarily produce the service yourself, but you have to stick to those basics. The second thing is you don't necessarily have to have the costs of running that service all for your own account. You can, of course, use part-timers, and you can use the crowd today. If you look at YouTube has built its content and its curation on the crowd. It's a completely different way of using people to deliver a service. They're still using people, but not necessarily their own people. All of that has changed, and I think we have to understand that the future was about servitization, and even more so in the future, it'll be about servitization, where products and services that are your core business are not what adds the value. The value is what you put into the customer's experience so that they get that result. And the more services you put in, the longer they'll stay with you, the stronger the relationship will be, the more data they will share with you, and the more they'll spend with you. And also they'll advocate for you, which is very important today with social media, because we're using customers as our scales force today. Most people buy today, or we know that the statistic is 80% of people will buy today. That buy today will first look for a review on the internet, whatever they buy, whether they're choosing a new surgeon or whether they're buying a washing machine. So reviews and what customers feel about you are critical. You can't survive today in an era of social media without positive reviews from your customer. And you cannot get positive reviews from your customer unless your experience, your total experience, pre, during, and post the sale is of the highest possible quality. And you can't produce high quality experiences without value add services. I think people are beginning to realize that they can't run their businesses without services, that the notion of a core business is detrimental because anybody can copy your core business. I think as people realize that it's not about having more and more people to deliver that service, but that you can do this digitally, which makes it financially feasible and cost effective. They're looking to see how they can use the technology to achieve this. As I said to you before, the pushback was our culture is manufacturing, whether it's making a home loan or making a car. Our culture is not service. And now that's not relevant anymore because you're using the technology. We can't have more and more people. It's not cost effective, not relevant anymore because of digital. Our customers won't pay for it, not relevant anymore because with digital services, you can actually reduce costs and you're learning more and more about customers, which helps you produce more and more value, become more and more of an expert, which means your costs go down and that reduction in costs or saving can be kicked back to the customer. So it becomes a virtuous cycle. So all the reasons why services in the past too formidable for business, people now realize is the future because they can use technology to deliver. I just think that I have spent, I don't want to exaggerate, let's say 45 years, okay? It's actually more. 45 years saying to companies, the product mentality is not sustainable. It's got to be customer centric. You know, the Nokia debacle was about selling more. They were selling more and more stuff that they kept making bigger, better. That was, you know, the Nokia story. It's about the value that people get out of it that matters. Some people sell you stuff, you never hear from them again. They don't know whether it's been good, it's been bad, it's worked, it hasn't worked. They don't know, they don't care. And you can't talk about lifetime value unless you're interested in the results that people are getting, unless you are involved in their daily lives in a relevant way and indispensable to them in the space that you choose. Now, you can only do that through services.